Imagine being thrust into the spotlight at 15, surrounded by fame, fortune, and power beyond your wildest dreams. Now imagine being just one of many young stars lost in that world, struggling to find yourself while the entire industry watches. This is Justin Bieber's story, and it's not what you think. Stay tuned, because we're diving deep into a story of fame, pressure, and survival. Recently, Justin Bieber shared a deeply personal post on Instagram, which offered a rare glimpse into the darker years of his life. In this heartfelt message, he candidly spoke about the extensive drug use he struggled with during his youth. He reflected on how the addiction profoundly impacted him, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. These years were marked by a sense of loss and confusion as he tried to navigate the chaos of fame at such a young age. But as he continues to heal, Justin shared that he has found solace and strength in his relationship with the Lord, which has become a foundation for his life. This newfound faith is his anchor, guiding him through the turbulence and bringing him peace in ways he had never known before. Years later, Justin is now working to rebuild his life. He's married, trying his best to embrace a sense of normalcy, something that feels almost foreign to someone who's been in the public eye since childhood. Yet, even with his efforts to live a grounded life, the scars of his past fame still affect him. The weight of being one of the most famous people in the world at such a young age is something he still carries. The spotlight, which once seemed like a dream, now feels like a heavy burden, one that he can't escape. The expectations, the judgment, and the constant pressure are all things he's had to learn to cope with. It's a constant battle between wanting to lead a quiet, peaceful life and the inescapable pull of the fame that made him who he is. Despite his desire for a simpler existence, there are still aspects of his life that remain at odds with that dream. For instance, rumors swirl about him buying his son a Bentley, a gift of immense value. Did he really? The question lingers in the public's mind. Given Justin's wealth and access to luxury, it wouldn't be out of the question. After all, he's had a life filled with extravagant gifts and experiences, but that doesn't necessarily make it right. The public's fascination with these details, whether it's the Bentley, the lavish gifts, or the promises made, highlights a deeper tension in his life. While his intentions might be to share his success with those he loves, these gestures often come with the weight of expectation. And speaking of grand promises, his fans are still waiting for that Lamborghini he promised them. It might seem like a small, almost playful topic, but the unresolved promise lingers over him like an unfulfilled obligation. The Lamborghini, a symbol of both his wealth and his word, remains absent, and the fans, still hopeful, continue to wait. The question remains, when will it come? Will it ever? This uncertainty mirrors the rest of Justin's journey, attempts to fulfill promises and live up to expectations, yet constantly navigating the space between reality and what's perceived to be his perfect life. Throughout his career, we've witnessed Justin surrounded by the opulence that comes with fame. He's lived a life of luxury that many dream of, a life of private jets, expensive cars, and an endless stream of extravagant experiences. One of the more significant chapters in his life came when he briefly spent time with Diddy, another giant of the entertainment industry. For those few days, Justin had full access to Diddy's world. A world that from the outside seemed like nothing but success, excess, and the pleasures that come with it. But within that world, things aren't always as they seem. Justin, who had been thrust into fame from such a young age, understood the weight of the environment he was now in. Even with the allure of fame and fortune, Justin knew the boundaries that needed to be respected. He knew that certain things, certain moments, were better left unsaid. This wasn't just a time to indulge in the wild, carefree life that so many associated with fame. It was also a time of reflection, a time when Justin understood that discretion was key. In a world where everything is under scrutiny, every move is analyzed, and every word can be twisted, he wisely chose to keep some moments private. However, even in his discretion, it's clear that these moments were still a part of his story, one that he couldn't entirely escape. Diddy, with all his power and influence, had his own way of shaping Justin's world. But despite the glitz and glam of Diddy's world, Justin's discomfort was palpable. He wasn't just a carefree teenager enjoying the ride. Instead, there was an underlying tension, a sense of unease. While he tried to play the part, to fit in with the persona expected of him, the awkwardness was undone. While he wasn't fully at ease, his attempts to laugh and engage with the moment felt more like attempts to cover up his uncertainty rather than genuine joy. And that's where things get complicated. As a teenager thrown into such a high-profile situation, Justin was at a crossroads. There's a huge difference between being excited about opportunities and being caught up in an environment that you don't fully understand. Joe Rogan, when discussing this moment on his podcast, broke it down in a way that left many people thinking. He pointed out that if you remove the celebrity factor, the whole scenario becomes much more disturbing. A 15-year-old handed over to a grown man for 48 hours. That isn't normal. No matter how much fame or luxury is involved, no matter how exciting the scenario might seem on the surface, it raises serious questions. The problem is that, in Hollywood, these questions are often swept under the rug. The lines between what's acceptable and what isn't can become incredibly blurred when the people involved are celebrities. And it's something that we, as a society, have become numb to, simply because it's wrapped in fame and fortune. Justin's awkwardness in those moments wasn't just a phase or something to laugh off. It was an indication of the pressure he was under and the confusion he felt. He was a young kid in a world that he couldn't fully control. And when you're that young, it's hard to speak up and say when something feels wrong, especially when those around you hold so much influence over your career and your future. This is what Joe Rogan pointed out, and it's what many of us fail to see. These weren't just celebrity moments. They were moments of exploitation, of power dynamics at play, of a system that didn't have the best interests of its young stars in mind. As the conversation continued, Rogan's outrage grew. He didn't just question Diddy's behavior, he questioned the system that allowed it to happen. He pointed out that, when a celebrity like Diddy is involved, people in the industry are often too afraid to ask the tough questions. They don't want to risk their access, their position, or their future in the industry. This is the dark side of fame, the part that people rarely see. It's not just the actions of one individual. It's the collective responsibility of an entire system that enables this kind of behavior to continue. And as long as we keep ignoring it, nothing will change. Looking at Justin now, it's clear that the scars of his past still affect him, but he's stronger now. He's learned from his past mistakes and is actively trying to move forward. The fact that he's still standing, still working, still striving to better himself is a testament to his strength. But that strength didn't come easily. It was forged in the fires of fame, pressure, and personal struggle. And as Rogan pointed out, people need to start respecting that. Justin didn't just get here because of his talent. He got here because he survived a system that wasn't always looking out for him. And that's something worth acknowledging. So while we may still question his past decisions, we must also recognize the challenges he faced. He's still here, still fighting, and still learning. It's not an easy road, but it's a road that many young artists have to walk. And for those of us watching from the outside, it's time we start paying attention, not just to the surface-level moments, but to the deeper truths behind them. Because once we really start looking, once we start asking the right questions, it's hard to see things the same way again. And that's why this conversation is so important. It's not just about one video or one moment, it's about everything that it represents. A story that needs to be told, a truth that needs to be uncovered. And Justin's journey, though complicated, is still unfolding. So what exactly was going on during those 48 hours? Diddy and Justin, two giants in the world of entertainment, spent time together, immersed in the intoxicating pleasures of fame. They indulged in everything the world of luxury and celebrity has to offer, but the reality behind those glamorous moments is not as carefree as it may seem on the surface. Picture the scene. Two men, both in their element, laughing and having a good time, yet something feels off. Beneath the laughter, there's a subtle tension. Justin's demeanor in that moment, while appearing joyful, reveals something far more uncertain. His smiles, though wide, seem forced, as if he's desperately trying to keep up with the moment but isn't fully comfortable in his own skin. It's as if he's playing a part in an unfamiliar script, trying to make it look like he belongs, even when he doesn't fully feel like he does. Joe Rogan later dissected this moment during his podcast, and he didn't hold back. To Rogan, this wasn't just another flashy, surface-level celebrity interaction. It was a deeply troubling situation that many had brushed aside at the time. Rogan pointed out that if you stripped away the glitter and the labels of fame, what you're left with is something unsettling. An underage teenager being handed over to an adult with seemingly no boundaries in sight. It's a scenario that would seem bizarre and alarming in any other context. But because this took place within the entertainment industry, because these were the stars, the untouchables, people simply looked the other way. They allowed it to be treated like just another harmless Hollywood moment, a part of the show, something to smile at and move on from. But in reality, that moment should have raised immediate questions. Rogan's words hit hard, and for good reason. He wasn't just commenting on a fleeting viral moment, he was calling attention to an uncomfortable truth. He noted that in that moment, Justin didn't look like someone who was truly enjoying an exclusive experience. He didn't look at ease, relaxed, or carefree. Instead, he appeared lost. His attempts to smile, to play along, were just that, attempts. He was trying to keep up, to fit into a narrative that wasn't his own, but the discomfort was undeniable. And that's what disturbed Rogan the most. For someone that young, thrust into a situation like that, it's incredibly hard to find your voice when something feels wrong. The power dynamics at play are overwhelming, especially when the person you're with holds so much influence over your career, your future, and the trajectory of your life. When you're young and surrounded by such powerful figures, you don't always have the confidence or the tools to say no when the situation feels off. Instead, you go along with it, not because you want to, but because you feel like you have no other choice. The world around you tells you that this is just how things are. The fear of losing opportunities, the fear of not living up to the expectations of those around you, those are powerful forces that push you to stay silent, even when everything inside you is screaming for you to speak up. Justin, in that moment, wasn't just a teenager in the spotlight. He was a young man struggling to find his footing in a world that demanded more of him than he could handle, without offering the protection or guidance he so desperately needed. The situation was more than just a casual encounter. It was a reflection of the larger, more insidious dynamics that take place in the world of fame and power. It was a moment when the industry's lack of boundaries, its relentless drive to turn everything into a spectacle, became painfully evident. And in that moment, Justin wasn't just a celebrity. He was a vulnerable young person trying to navigate a world that didn't seem to care about his well-being. It was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of growing up under the spotlight and the price that many young stars have to pay for their fame. Rogan's outrage wasn't solely directed at Diddy. While he certainly took issue with Diddy's actions, Rogan also called out the broader network of people surrounding Justin, his managers, executives, and the entire industry that enabled this behavior. To him, the real problem wasn't just the actions of one individual. It was the entire system that allowed it to happen in the first place. Those within the industry saw what was going on and, disturbingly, treated it as if it were nothing more than entertainment. They didn't view it as a serious issue, something that should have been questioned or addressed. Instead, they brushed it off, allowing the exploitation to continue because, in their eyes, it was just another story of fame and excess. A moment to be consumed by the public, not something to be held accountable. This is what truly troubled Rogan, the systemic failure to protect vulnerable individuals, particularly young artists, who are caught in the jaws of an industry that thrives on fame, fortune, and the access it provides. The industry's focus on maintaining the spectacle, the attention, and the profits often leads it to turn a blind eye to the real, human consequences that occur behind the scenes. It's a world where the value of a person is often measured by how much they can bring in, rather than whether they're being cared for and protected. This indifference to the well-being of young stars is not just a side effect of the industry, it's built into its very structure. What bothered Rogan the most wasn't just the absence of boundaries. It was the fact that this kind of behavior, this exploitation, was allowed to happen over and over again. The more he spoke, the more it became clear to him that it wasn't enough to simply focus on one person. It wasn't enough to blame one individual for the dysfunction. The system itself needed to be examined and held accountable. When you see repeated patterns of harmful behavior and hear multiple stories from people who have experienced similar things, it's impossible to ignore. You have to stop and ask, what's really going on here? The question demands attention, especially when the same issues keep resurfacing. Justin's rise to fame wasn't without its tolls, and the weight of those years in the spotlight has left an indelible mark on him. Growing up in the public eye comes with its own set of challenges, and when you're surrounded by people who don't always have your best interests at heart, the pressure becomes even more unbearable. Rogan pointed out how fame, especially at such a young age, can distort a person's sense of reality. When you're constantly living up to the expectations of others, constantly in the spotlight, you lose sight of who you really are. The weight of it can twist your mind, and in Justin's case, that pressure manifested in ways that many people misinterpreted as mere rebellion. But Rogan, in his analysis, understood that these weren't random acts of defiance or misbehavior. They were the outward signs of the immense pressure Justin had been under for years, pressure that no teenager should have to bear, especially not when they're still trying to figure out who they are amidst the chaos of fame. These were not isolated incidents, nor were they just a part of growing up. They were part of a much bigger picture, one in which Justin was trapped. The pressure to succeed, to meet expectations, to stay on top. It's a cycle that many young stars find themselves caught in, and one that doesn't easily let go. Rogan's commentary forced a shift in perspective. It wasn't just about Justin's struggles, it was about the system that made those struggles inevitable. And until that system is questioned and reformed, nothing will change. The industry will continue to chew up and spit out young stars, and they will continue to suffer the consequences of a system that values profit over people. Justin's emotional interview, where he spoke about his desire to protect younger artists like Billie Eilish, revealed a side of him that many people hadn't seen before. It wasn't just a well-rehearsed public statement or an attempt to appear empathetic. It was real, raw emotion. In that moment, Justin wasn't just talking about others. He was talking about his own experiences, his struggles, and the weight of his past. When he got emotional, it wasn't for effect. It was because something deep inside him had been stirred, something that had been buried for a long time. Joe Rogan, reflecting on that moment, pointed out something significant. You don't get that emotional unless something has profoundly impacted you. That raw vulnerability was a turning point for Justin. It was the moment when he began to see things through a different lens, and it forced Rogan to reconsider everything he thought he knew about Justin's journey. Looking back at those old clips, those awkward, almost uncomfortable interactions between Justin and the people around him, Rogan saw them not as isolated incidents, but as pieces of a much bigger, untold story. In those moments, the cracks in Justin's carefully curated image started to show. The young star wasn't just going through the motions of fame. He was carrying a heavy emotional burden, one that hadn't been fully acknowledged by those watching. That's what drove Rogan to speak out on his podcast. For him, it wasn't just about one video or one single awkward moment. It was about everything that moment represented, everything that had been ignored or overlooked for years. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a pattern that should have raised alarms long ago. But because of the fame and power of the people involved, it was normalized. It became part of the machinery of Hollywood, something that was accepted, no questions asked. Rogan's message was simple yet powerful. We need to stop pretending that everything in Hollywood is normal just because it involves celebrities. When you strip away the layers of fame, money, and influence, the situations that unfold are often unsettling and at times deeply troubling. If the same scenario were to occur outside the world of entertainment, without the gloss of celebrity, people would be asking serious questions. But because it's wrapped in the spectacle of fame, it gets treated differently. Rogan pointed out that this is a massive problem, and it's one that needs to change. People need to stop accepting things at face value simply because they involve famous people or flashy moments. Too often, the true impact, the emotional toll, the psychological consequences, goes unseen, hidden behind the glamour. And until that changes, the cycle will continue. The industry, the people in power, and even the fans need to start looking beyond the surface and ask themselves, what's really going on here? Only then can we begin to address the deeper issues that have been allowed to fester for so long. By the end of his passionate rant, Rogan made one thing clear. His concerns weren't just about Justin. They were about the entire industry, the system that has been allowed to operate unchecked for far too long. Rogan argued that the entire structure of Hollywood and the entertainment industry at large needs to be reevaluated. The way young artists are treated, the pressure they are placed under, and the lack of support they receive all need to be questioned. It's not enough to continue to accept the system simply because it's convenient or because it has always been this way. The real change begins when we start looking at the system with a critical eye and demand better for the next generation of artists. Rogan didn't shy away from giving Justin credit either. Despite everything he's been through, despite the immense pressure, the scrutiny, and the battles that have played out behind closed doors, Justin is still here. He's still working. He's still trying to move forward, and that in itself is no small feat. The resilience Justin has shown, despite the odds stacked against him, speaks volumes about his strength. Growing up in the spotlight, especially under the kind of intense pressure Justin faced, could break anyone. Yet, Justin continues to push through, continuing to pursue his career and maintain some semblance of normalcy in his personal life. That's a testament to his character, a reminder of just how much strength it takes to survive in an industry that often overlooks the well-being of its young stars. But as Rogan emphasized, the real takeaway here is much bigger than Justin's individual story. It's about all of us. We need to start paying attention, Not just to the celebrities and the glitzy surface-level moments we're shown, but to the deeper, darker realities beneath them. We need to stop accepting the status quo simply because it's easier. We need to start asking serious questions, challenging the structures that allow exploitation to continue unchecked. Fame and power can blind us to the truth, making it easy to dismiss anything uncomfortable as just part of the game. But when we look past the glittering world of fame and the complex power dynamics at play, we begin to see the real story. And that story isn't always as pretty as it seems. It's time for change, and it starts with acknowledging what's been hiding in plain sight for far too long. Before we dive deeper into what happened behind closed doors, do me a favor. If this story is making you question what you thought you knew about Justin, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.